Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Catherine Seltner in our Washington, D.C. studio. Here's what you can expect in this show. This Adoption Awareness Month, we delve into the ethical debate over embryo adoption. Vice President Mike Pence responds to a celebrity's pro-abortion prank, and this.
If we don't preserve the rights of conscience and the rights of religious liberty, we will not be given a choice to preserve life at all stages.
We tell you how a group of retired Catholics are defending life. But first, our top story, pro-lifers call on Congress to pass the Conscience Protection Act.
Healthcare, my friends, is about saving life. It is about eradicating disease. It's about mitigating disability, not taking the lives of unborn children.
Congress needs to act now. It is time for this compassionate, reasonable, and modest bill to be voted on so that we can allow millions of Americans who believe, as I do, in the sanctity of life.
Those comments came during a press conference hosted by Representative Chris Smith on Capitol Hill Wednesday. The Conscience Protection Act would bar the federal government and any state and local governments that receive federal funding from taking action against healthcare professionals who conscientiously object to performing, paying, or participating in any procedure they find morally objectionable. One nurse at the press conference tells us how she has fought against discriminatory healthcare policies.
They wanted all of the staff in same-day surgery to assist in the abortion. And we didn't have any choice. They just told us that it's either you assist or we'll just have to either relocate you someplace else in the hospital.
Pro-life leaders want Congress to pass the Conscience Protection Act as part of the appropriations bill for the 2018 fiscal year. For a reaction and more analysis, we are joined by our trusted pro-life expert. Mallory Quigley is Communications Director for the Susan B. Anthony List. Mallory, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on, Catherine.
Absolutely. So what protections are in place for pro-life healthcare professionals right now? Are there any?
Well, not many. We do have the Weldon Amendment, which is a federal amendment, which basically it would punish states for discriminating against pro-life individuals or healthcare entities. But under the Obama administration, for 8 years, the Weldon Amendment was left alone and was not actually enforced. That's why we need the Conscience Protection Act.
So what would the Conscience Protection Act actually do, and do you expect it will pass?
Well, it would create a private right of action for both the individual healthcare professionals and the entities that they work for, basically to fight back against discrimination that they may face in their states. And by passing this law, it would basically outlast any administration. So it wouldn't matter if a pro-abortion administration comes in and decides to once again stop enforcing the Weldon Amendment. It would create a recourse for these victims perpetually. And we certainly do expect that it could come into law. This is something that is a priority of the president. It's something that Speaker Ryan feels very strongly about. But that's why these nurses are in town this week to talk to members of Congress and make sure that they're including it in the appropriations legislation coming up in December.
Mallory, you are deeply involved in the pro-life movement. How does your conscience facilitate your work?
Yeah, well, there definitely is like a certain insult and injury to it, isn't there? If you wake up every morning and your whole mission is to fight for the protection of life, and then we have things like the HHS mandate, or imagine being like one of these nurses who's taken an oath to cure and to help and to protect life. So I think that conscience is so important, and it definitely drives me in my work at Susan B. Anthony List. But you don't have to just work at a pro-life organization or be a pro-life healthcare professional to claim that conscience right.
Absolutely, and to claim that as part of your identity that you're pro-life. You mentioned the administration's support of this. We saw recently them grant more protection to pro-life groups such as the Little Sisters of the Poor from the contraceptive HHS mandate. What signals have we seen that they do support more conscience protection?
Well, that was certainly a huge example, huge indicator of the president's commitment to conscience and allowing a religious freedom, allowing us to live out our beliefs in the public square. But And so we know that he supports this, but there really is only so much that the administration, the executive branch can do. It really is important that Congress take action and give this private right of action to these current victims and any victims that may come along in the future. Of course, we hope not, but give them a means to fight back.
And so we want them to put this in the appropriations bill for next year.
Yes, and that is all going to come to a head right at the beginning of December. So it's important that over the course of the next few weeks we stay engaged.
Absolutely. Mallory Quigley, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This week's call to action is one that's important to follow not only as pro-lifers, but as Catholics. Our conscience is, as the Catechism reminds us, man's most secret core, his sanctuary. Our conscience is what guides us to follow faithfully what we know to be just and right. And yet, current U.S. federal law does not sufficiently protect the conscience rights of healthcare professionals and others. There have been instances where health professionals, against their religious beliefs, were forced to participate in abortions. This is scandalous, offensive, and must come to an end. With that, here is this week's call to action. Type in this website in your computer or smartphone, prolifeweekly.com. At that website, you can take action and tell Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to include the Conscience Protection Act and the upcoming appropriations bill. If the Conscience Protection Act is passed, it would bar the federal government and any state and local governments that receive federal funding from taking action against healthcare professionals who conscientiously object to performing, paying, or participating in any procedure they find morally objectionable. This is fundamental for allowing pro-lifers to live out our beliefs in good conscience. This legislation is a priority for the U.S. bishops and should be for everyone who values life and liberty. Tell Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to include the Conscience Protection Act and the upcoming appropriations bill. Send your message by going to prolifeweekly.com. Turning now to more national pro-life news, the president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says a culture of life cannot tolerate mass shootings. In response to Sunday's mass shooting that killed 26 people in a small-town Texas church, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo issued a statement saying, in part, "We must come to the firm determination that there is a fundamental problem in our society. A culture of life cannot tolerate and must prevent senseless gun violence in all its forms." The Trump administration claims the American Civil Liberties Union misled the Justice Department in the case of the pregnant immigrant teen, Jane Doe, who recently obtained an abortion. In a Supreme Court filing, the Justice Department says the ACLU did not alert government lawyers the teen's abortion took place a day earlier than expected. The administration says that deprived its lawyers the chance to ask the High Court to block the procedure, at least temporarily.
I never called someone in the womb a fetus unless I was going to abort it. Otherwise, it was a baby. Yeah. And we have, we have just for so long denied the rights of these little people.
Former abortionist turned pro-life advocate Dr. Kathy Altman testified on Capitol Hill last week at the Heartbeat Protection Act of 2017 hearing. The legislation would prohibit abortion in cases where a preborn baby's heartbeat is detectable. It has nearly 170 co-sponsors. Representative Steve King of Iowa is sponsoring the Heartbeat Protection Act of 2017. He joins us now from Capitol Hill. Congressman, thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it.
Abortion advocates are arguing your bill would virtually ban all abortions because it would prevent abortions before many women even know they are pregnant. Is that the goal here?
Well, it should be the goal for pro-life people to put an end to abortion. And I pointed this out in my opening statement and also in, I guess I'll say, op-eds that I've written and throughout my entire public life, and going clear back to my first minutes as a father, that do we agree with two questions to ask? The first one is human life sacred in all of its forms? And we're universally say, yes, it is. And so there's only one other question to ask, and that is, at what moment or what instant does life begin? It begins at that moment or instant of conception.
Is this bill a successful strategy? Do you expect there's going to be a vote on the bill, and do you expect it to pass?
We are positioned now to make the call for a markup in the full committee, and if we can get that done, my goal is to have the heartbeat bill on the floor of the United States House of Representatives on January 19th, which will be the March for Life Day in early 2018.
Congressman, we recently saw the Jane Doe case when an undocumented, unaccompanied minor tragically got an abortion. I bring this up because of controversy facing one of your tweets from earlier this year and comments on immigration when you said you cannot rebuild your civilization with somebody else's babies. Congressman, my question is, would the Heartbeat Protection Act extend to the preborn babies of illegal immigrants?
Well, the Heartbeat Protection Act is consistent with the statement that I tweeted out, and this government should not be involved in ending human life. We should be involved in protecting human life. And I think that we need to pass also my legislation that ends this automatic citizenship to babies that are born to illegal parents in America. But I want to save all of their lives. This little baby had been born, would have been an anchor baby, would have been an American citizen, and that would have, that you think would have been a good benefit for that child. If I have to choose between automatic citizenship for babies born to illegal parents in America or abortion, I'm going to let them go ahead and have the automatic citizenship. But we can fix this thing two ways.
Congressman, how did you personally get involved in the pro-life movement in the first place?
Yeah, I came in there partly through my church and partly through political activism, but I would just say for me that Marilyn and I were married in '72. By time 1976 rolled around, our first child was born, David. And I remember thinking, could anyone take his life now? This squirming, little, peaceful little guy, could they take his life now? No, that would be the most cruel thing. Well, could they take his life the minute after he was born? Could they take it the minute before he was born, or the hour, or the day, or the week, or the month, or trimester? And the answer to that was no, all the way back to conception. And in a matter of, well, seconds, minutes, if not seconds, I came to the conclusion that life begins at that moment of conception because there's no other moment. And that life is sacred. This life was sacred to me. Everyone is sacred. And I've had deep conviction on pro-life ever since. I've never lost my conviction on it, and I don't think we've ever lost a debate either.
Representative Steve King of Iowa, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate the chance to talk today.
Now, with the global perspective of the pro-life issue, we go to EWTN's Valeria Longhi for the international headlines.
The Constitutional Court of Colombia has decided minors suffering from a terminal illness will have access to euthanasia. The pro-life community in the country has strongly criticized the decision, saying it goes against the constitutional article declaring human life inviolable and opens the doors to making euthanizing minors a business. The Colombian Conference of Catholic Bishops, after a General Assembly this past weekend, issued a statement saying it considers the country to be going through a very delicate and important moment. They emphasized the lack of respect and insensitivity to human life in the country, among other issues, and reiterated one of the keys to confronting the country's problems is to address the dignity of human life, advice shared by Pope Francis's September visit. Women from Northern Ireland now have access to free abortions through the national healthcare system in Scotland. Eileen Campbell, the Scottish Public Health Minister, claims women faced a burden in having to travel to Scotland for an abortion. Abortions in Northern Ireland are illegal, with the exception of when the mother's life is in danger or if there are serious risks to her physical or mental health. Last weekend, Portugal held its annual March for Life. People from Lisbon, Porto, and Aveiro took to the streets to support the culture of life. Pope Francis, in a letter of encouragement to the march organizers, says he wishes more men and women of goodwill would courageously embrace the truth that each human being has dignity and value that comes from God. Cardinal Manuel Clemente, president of the Portuguese Catholic Episcopal Conference and Patriarch of Lisbon, also had words of encouragement for the marchers.
Porque a vida é isso, a vida é caminho e, como nós sabemos, é caminho da concepção à morte natural.
He said life, like this march, is a walk from conception to natural death, and that it must be accompanied in all its stages by conviction, action, and solidarity to others. Valeria Longhi, EWTN, Pro-Life Weekly.
Thank you, Valeria, for those pro-life headlines. As November marks Adoption Awareness Month, we want to raise a topic that has stirred up debate among pro-life Catholics. The Church remains clearly and boldly against in vitro fertilization, when an egg is combined with sperm outside of the body to create life and then implanted in a woman's uterus. The pro-life debate at hand centers around what to do with extra embryos that are created for IVF but never implanted. One group, Nightlight Christian Adoptions, believes embryo adoption is a pro-life solution.
Even though the embryos are created in a laboratory by an embryologist, the embryologist is not the one that is gifting the embryo with life. That's God. And we're excited to join God in this particular effort to save lives out of frozen storage.
Embryo adoption is when one couple donates their frozen embryos to another couple to achieve a pregnancy. Babies born from embryo adoptions are known as snowflake babies. But not all Catholics or pro-lifers support embryo adoption. We spoke earlier with a Catholic bioethics expert to delve into its implications. Dr. Kevin Donovan is the director of the Pellegrino Center for Clinical Bioethics at Georgetown University Medical Center. He is also an associate scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Dr. Donovan, it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
As we begin this discussion, can you clarify why the Church condemns in vitro fertilization?
The Church doesn't interfere or want to interfere with assisting in reproduction by legitimate means. But what they don't want is a technological replacement of reproduction. Because basically, in IVF, you are creating life in a glass petri dish or a test tube, outside the womb, outside the purview of the married couple. It's basically you invited a third party into that process and technological interference.
Is church teaching as clear when it comes to embryo adoption then?
No, it is not. One of the reasons the Church condemns IVF is because they produce more embryos than are necessary and then frequently store the excess embryos, freezing them until they can be used. But for a significant number of those who've been frozen, they're never going to be used by the couple who had them frozen in the first place.
So what should a couple do? Say they have gone through in vitro fertilization. They've already made that decision. What does the Church call them to do with all of those frozen embryos?
Well, it's an extremely difficult question. Whether those people, were Catholics who got involved in IVF or not Catholics. If you have frozen an embryo, there are at least 3 things that could be done with it if you're not planning on ever implanting it and giving it a chance to develop into a full life. In many cases, they're discarded, thawed, and destroyed.
And those are human lives.
And those are human lives.
Right.
In the second case, they may just turn it over to the IVF clinic and say, why don't you donate it for scientific research? In which case, it's once again destroyed after the research is done.
Right.
They can also say, well, just give it to anybody else who might want it. And that's been done as well. But really, the fourth option is a variation on that third option, and that is we will have it adopted out, which means we have a say in who gets it. We will look and see what this couple is like or whether we like them or not. And that's the embryo adoption programs.
Now, there is this debate within Catholic circles, within Catholic pro-life circles, on what to do when it comes to embryo adoption. You have some arguing these are human lives who need to be brought up in full fruition, and others arguing the end does not justify the means. It really is a contentious issue, isn't it?
You do like the complex questions.
in short periods of time to discuss, exactly.
And this is one. This is
Right.
one of the most complex questions, certainly in the current field of reproductive ethics, because on the one hand, to participate in this is participating in IVF, which the Church does rightly condemn.
Right.
But at the same time, we have, it's estimated over 600,000 frozen embryos, maybe up to 1 million, right now in the United States, and at least 15% of those we know will never be implanted. So what should happen to them? It's a really difficult question that even Pope John Paul II, a saint, could not resolve, did not attempt to resolve. So the Catholic Church hasn't resolved this yet either. And I think what's happening is that people are, with the advice of their confessor or their spiritual advisor, thinking about this prayerfully and deciding whether or not they would want to go ahead with it. And unfortunately, that doesn't even solve all the problems. There are many legal issues about who would this embryo belong to.
Custody cases we're seeing pop up throughout the U.S.
Absolutely right, because, in the courts, these embryos are still looked at as property, not people.
Absolutely. Well, we're grateful for your insight, Dr. Kevin Donovan. Thanks for joining us, and there is so much more to discuss, but this was very helpful.
You're very welcome.
When we come back.
When you tell them the truth, and you tell it clearly, and you let them know that that's what you believe, it goes into their head, and it does eventually go into their heart.
Meet a group of women who are putting their retirement to use by educating children on religious liberty and its connection to the pro-life cause. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Zeltner. Actress Mila Kunis admits a prank she regularly pulls on Vice President Mike Pence, but it's no laughing matter. Take a listen to what the celebrity had to say last week on TBS's Conan.
I put him on a list of reoccurring donations that are made in his name to Planned Parenthood. And so every month to his office, he gets a little letter that says, like, anonymous donation has been made in your name.
Kunis says her donations to Planned Parenthood in Pence's name are less of a prank and more of a peaceful protest. She wants them to be a reminder to the vice president there are women out there who disagree with his platform. We should all feel free to disagree, to voice our opinion, and to exercise our rights. It contributes to healthy dialogue in our society. But it's incredibly disappointing Mila Kunis would choose Planned Parenthood as a way to be a voice for women. Planned Parenthood objectifies women. Planned Parenthood, by being the nation's largest abortion provider, preys on women in their most vulnerable time instead of supporting them. Planned Parenthood performs over 300,000 abortions per year. About half of those unborn lives are women in their earliest stages. If you want to support women, Mila Kunis, don't support Planned Parenthood. The abortion giant already enjoys $500 million of our tax dollars a year and regular contributions from other Hollywood elites. The pro-life Susan B. Anthony list quickly responded to Kunis's prank. The group's president, Marjorie Danenfelser, tweeted out, "We're now accepting donations to the pro-life cause in Vice President Mike Pence's name. Let's take a stand for life." It caught the eye of the pro-life vice president, who tweeted back, "I'm honored. Thanks for all Susan B. Anthony list does for life. I'm in." Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow our call to action this week. Go to prolifeweekly.com and tell Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to include the Conscience Protection Act in the upcoming appropriations bill. As we've been discussing throughout this show, conscience rights are fundamental to living out our pro-life views. And yet, a surprising number of Americans don't know what their religious liberty rights are, as guaranteed by the First Amendment. That is why, instead of slowing down in retirement, a group of Catholic women have found new value in their life as they inform and empower Catholics about their rights. Here's this week's Pro-Life Focus. These 4 New York women, Lorraine, Barbara, Virginia, and Patricia, came together 6 years ago because after the HHS contraceptive mandate was established, they individually felt called to defend religious liberty.
Most of us never knew each other before this whole thing happened with the HHS mandate.
I met Barbara first, and we became friends, and that's when she called me about this. We agreed on other issues first, and then we realized we had a common bond.
The 4 women recognized many Americans didn't even know their religious liberty and conscience rights. Thus, Catholics for Freedom of Religion was born. Their work was warmly welcomed at the Little Sisters of the Poor residence in D.C. recently.
The whole board is made up of women, so I think, hey, that's wonderful, isn't it?
The group hosts speaking events, plans prayer vigils, writes informative bulletins, and creates videos like this one.
Right to petition for redress of grievances.
To educate faithful Americans about religious liberty.
Freedom of religion, our first freedom, is the guardian of all our liberties because it affirms that God, not government, has endowed our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
The school curriculum has been approved by the U.S. bishops as Catholics for Freedom of Religion are invited to speak to students for Religious Liberty Lessons 101. All 4 women are in retirement, meaning this new calling was unexpected, but each one is now in a position to respond with greater freedom.
We don't have to worry about losing a job. You know, we don't have to worry about time. We are available. We will go any place.
Catholics for Freedom of Religion connect religious liberty rights with being pro-life.
Pro-life people are being shut down. They are being accused of, actually, they're being brought to courts, being brought to trials, just for exercising their freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble. They're being told that this is hate speech.
Oh, the right to freedom of conscience and the right to religious liberty is the other leg on which we stand when we want to preserve faith and we want to preserve life at all stages.
This grassroots effort to educate, empower, and inform Catholics is a proactive response to today's culture of death. Each woman with their unique professional background shows us how God can call us to new things at any stage in life, to protect life.
I'm always concerned about the elderly. They get sick and they're not useful anymore. They're costing the government money. They're costing insurance companies money. So why keep them around? Why just not? They're not contributing any more than an unborn baby is.
If we don't preserve the rights of conscience and the rights of religious liberty, we will not be given a choice to preserve life at all stages.
If you'd like to know more about this group, you can visit CatholicsForFreedomOfReligion.org. That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach us anytime at prolifeweekly@EWTN.com. I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.